What would happen if tomorrow morning every social worker in this country simply stopped working? Who would answer the call when a child reports abuse? Who would sit with a father navigating grief after unexpected loss? Who will support the teacher on the verge of burnout or the veteran struggling to reintegrate? The mother battling postpartum depression in silence? Who would walk into hospitals, schools, courtrooms, and community agencies and hold the emotional, psychological, and social weight that others cannot? Second question. Historically, who has done that work? The answer is women. March is both Social Work Month and Women's History Month, and that intersection is not coincidence. And because the history of social work is not simply the history of a profession, it is the history of women as well as men. But today we're going to focus on the women who have organized when they were excluded, women who built systems when they were denied authority, women who shaped public policy while being denied full participation in it. Women have always held communities together, and often without recognition, without adequate compensation, and sometimes without rest. And so today's episode is about honoring that legacy, but it's also about understanding the moment that we are in. Because if we truly value the power of care, then we must also value the people who provide it. Any meaningful discussion of social work's formal beginnings must start with Jane Addams. She co-founded Whole House in Chicago. The Whole House was not simply a place where services were handed out. It was a site of research, organizing, and policy development. Whole House provided childcare, education, employment assistance, public health initiatives, and legal support to immigrants and working class family navigating life in an industrializing America. But what distinguished Jane Addams was not just compassion, it was the intellectual rigor. She and her colleagues documented the living conditions of the communities they served. They studied sanitation, labor exploitation, housing overcrowding, and access to education. They gathered data and used it to advocate for legislative reform. Jane Addams understood something that still defines excellent social work today. Individual care without systemic change only produces temporary relief. And lasting transformation requires attention to the conditions shaping people's lives: housing, wages, public education, public health, and access to opportunity. Her work positions social work not as charity, but as applied social science. And in 1931, she became the first American woman to receive the Nobel Peace Prize, a recognition not only of humanitarian compassion, but of policy influence and global thought leadership. She demonstrated that care work could also be intellectual work. That woman's leadership could shape national discourse, and that social workers can influence how societies function. And that legacy continues to shape the profession today. All right, beautiful people, if this episode has already blessed you in any sort of way, we ask that you like, subscribe, follow, share, and leave comments. Feedback helps this message reach the people who need it most. And if you're listening and thinking, I'm ready to go deeper in my healing journey, we invite you to join our school community where we continue these conversations between episodes, and it's an opportunity to connect with like-minded individuals committed to growth, healing, and purpose. Also, do not forget, you can shop the merch and also explore all things Evolve at evolvewithdrjnicole.com. If you love today's look and you're wondering about this hair, you can use my promo code with the link in the description to get 15% off with Unice hair. That's UNICE. Thank you for rising with us. Now back to your regularly scheduled programming. But the story of social work cannot be told honestly without acknowledging who was excluded from early professional recognition. Black women. Black women were practicing social work long before the profession was formally named. Mary Church Terrell stands as one of the most significant figures at the intersection of race, gender, and social reform. Born in 1863 to formerly enslaved parents who became successful business owners, she was among the first Black women in the United States to earn a college degree. And she used that education not simply for personal development, but for community transformation. In 1896, she helped found the National Association of Colored Women. This organization addressed the urgent needs of Black communities at the time when segregation excluded them from the many public and private services, and Black women organized child care centers, educational programs, housing support, and advocacy initiatives, building parallel systems of care where none existed. This was a macro social work before a macro social work even had a name. And Mary Church Terrell and her contemporaries understood that social support could not be separated from social justice. They confronted lynching, educational inequality, employment discrimination, and political disenfranchisement, all while providing direct support to families and communities. Her motto, Lifting as We Climb, captured the ethos of collective advancement. Progress was never meant to be individual, it was meant to be communal. And her work reminds us that social work has always been shaped by questions of power: who has access to the resources, who is excluded, and who steps forward to fill the gap. We must also name Annabelle Burns Lindsay, a pioneering social work educator whose leadership helped solidify the academic and professional foundation of the field. Annabelle Burns Lindsay served as the dean of the Howard University School of Social Work and played a critical role in shaping the professional training of generations of social workers, myself included, particularly Black social workers who face limited access to formal education during segregation. I have benefited from her legacy as a two-time graduate of the Howard University School of Social Work. And it was under her leadership, Howard University School of Social Work became one of the most influential training grounds for Black social workers in the United States. She understood that if social work was to be respected as a profession, and if Black practitioners were to be taken seriously within, the field required rigorous academic standards, research foundations, and institutional credibility. Howard was not simply educating practitioners, it was producing leaders, policy shapers, administrators, educators, professionals who would go on to influence public health systems, child welfare structure, and community development nationwide. Ina Bell Burns Lindsay's work reinforced that social work was not informal charity. It was structured, research informed, ethically grounded practice. Her leadership ensured that the profession would endure intellectually and institutionally. And yet, social work continues to be undervalued across sectors. Historically, work associated with nurturing, emotional support, and relational labor has been perceived as natural rather than skilled, something that women can simply be expected to do. But social work is not instinct. It requires critical assessment, ethical decision making, crisis intervention skills, policy knowledge, and systems navigation. It requires emotional regulation, cultural competence, and professional judgment under pressure. Social workers stabilize families before crises escalate. Social workers support students before academic failure becomes permanent. Social workers intervene in communities before instability becomes violence. Care is infrastructure. Mental health support is infrastructure. Family stabilization is infrastructure. And women have built and maintained that infrastructure for generations without proportional recognition or compensation. Currently, we are navigating a national mental health crisis. Demand for services continues to rise across schools, healthcare systems, and community agencies. And at the same time, workforce shortages, burnout, and funding limitations challenge the sustainability of the profession. Social workers are managing high caseloads while addressing increasingly complex needs, trauma exposure, economic instability, educational disparities, and health inequities. Many systems still prioritize crisis response over prevention. But prevention is where social work excels. When families receive earlier support, fewer children enter foster care. When students receive mental health services, educational outcomes improve. When communities receive stable housing and employment support, public health also improves. Investment in social work is an investment in societal stability. Yet, for that investment to be meaningful, the workforce itself must be sustained. The women who built this profession did not wait for permission. They organized, they educated, they advocated, they built, but they also endured enormous pressure. The next evolution of social work must prioritize sustainability alongside service. Compassion without boundaries leads to burnout. Advocacy without support leads to attrition. Social workers must increasingly occupy leadership roles in policy, administration, research, and media. The profession cannot remain invisible while addressing some of society's most pressing challenges. Visibility matters, voice matters, leadership matters. The women who hold our communities together rarely receive headlines. They sit in offices after hours. They answer calls that others cannot answer. They carry stories that would overwhelm most people. But history reminds us of something very powerful. When care is organized with intention, communities stabilize. When care is professionalized with rigor, systems strengthen. And when care is led with vision, societies transform. This month, we honor the women who built social work. And we commit to supporting those who continue to carry it forward. Because of care, when paired with justice, does not simply comfort individuals, it shapes futures. I'm Dr. J. Nicole, and this is Rise and Thrive. Keep rising in faith and keep thriving in purpose. I'll see you next time.